we are going to see the interesting tricks of this doweling jig for making dowel joints. And we will see them while building a bookcase. So, here I have the parts of the bookcase that I prepared in the previous video. I had already marked the position where the shelves will go, and we are going to see how to easily adjust the depth at which we are going to drill the holes. So, if I place a dowel there, we can see that the hole in the side of the bookcase will be less deep than in the edge of the shelf. But we also need to avoid the tip of the drill bit going through the other side of the board. This is the wood drill bit that I am going to use. It is 8 millimeters in diameter. I use clamp-type depth stops, as they tighten very well around the drill bit. So, I have this 2.5 millimeters thick washer that I place there against the edge of the board. I place the doweling jig on the edge of the board, with the 8 millimeters hole that I am going to use right above the washer. I insert the drill bit into the jig hole until the tip rests against the washer. I let the depth stop slide down to the jig. And now I can easily tighten the depth stop. I lightly press the depth stop and the jig downward and tighten the depth stop well. This way, I'm going to drill a hole of the proper depth and make sure the drill bit doesn't go through the other side of the board. With that depth stop adjustment, I drill a hole in any board. That first adjustment was just to make this single hole. I clean it well, and I fully insert one of the wooden dowels that I'm going to use to assemble the bookcase. This time, I'm going to use this 4 millimeters thick sheet. I place it like this on top of the dowel. I put the doweling jig on top. I insert the drill bit until the tip rests on the board. I slide the stop until it reaches the doweling jig. I try to keep the drill bit parallel to the dowel. And while slightly pressing down the doweling jig in the stop, I tighten the depth stop well. So with this depth stop adjustment, now I can drill the edge of the bookcase shelves. And ideally this should be done with the shelves in a vertical position. But here, they will wobble too much. I can place them here. Or maybe use a workbench that can help put the shelves vertically. We can also put a wooden strip under the shelves. Like this. When drilling with the jig, the angle improves the posture. I secure the shelf with clamps. And I can now drill more or less on the marks I made. And I say more or less because we don't have to be super precise drilling right on the marks. Although the more precise, the better. However, the stops on the drilling jig must be well pressed against the faces of the board. That is to ensure that the hole comes out perfectly centered on the edge. And to make sure the hole is perfectly at 90 degrees to the edge, the jig must be well supported against the edge of the board. I hook the stops well and press them against the faces of the board. I check that the mark is within the hole. I make sure the surface of the jig is perfectly supported against the edge of the board. And I drill the hole for the corresponding dowel. It is important to clean the bottom of the doweling jig so that it always rests well on the edge of the shelf. And that is how easy it is to drill all the holes in the edges of the shelves. Three holes on each side of each shelf, 4 shelves, 24 holes. So now I can glue these dowels into the edges of the shelves. I recommend using high-quality dowels. I apply a little carpenter's glue in each of the holes. And I insert the dowels all the way into the holes. I insert the dowels into all the shelves. And now I can drill the holes in the faces of the side panels of the bookcase. So I adjust the depth stop again to drill the holes in the face of the panels, using the 2.5 millimeters thick washer. So this is one of the sides of the bookcase. And here I see that I have this 4L on the side. I place the corresponding shelf on top, so we can see that I have the edge banding on both sides. I make sure that the number and letter on the shelf match, and are read from the same side as on the side of the bookcase. And we can see the line where I need to drill the holes. I need the shelf to be perfectly aligned on top of the side of the bookcase. Now, the doweling jig has, in front of each drilling hole, a groove with a width equal to the diameter of the corresponding hole. It also has a mark on the side, aligned with the center of the drilling holes, and another identical mark on the other side of the jig. So both marks must be placed exactly on the corresponding line. I place the corresponding groove on the dowel of the shelf and align the marks with the line on the board. The jig can move forward or backward to adjust it to the line. Here we see the marks right on the line. And this way, I can drill each hole exactly on the line and perfectly aligned with each dowel I placed in the shelf. Here, on the side, a mark might fall outside the board. But it is enough to align the other mark with the line and leave the front of the jig more or less parallel with the edge of the shelf. So I check that the drilling jig has enough room in front of it to align the marks with the line. And with the help of a wood strip and clamps, I secure the shelf. The edges of the shelf and the side of the bookcase must be perfectly flush. With the jig placed on the dowel, I make sure the jig's marks are on the line, and I drill the hole. And I do the same for all the dowels on this edge of this shelf. After drilling each hole, it's important to clean the bottom of the doweling jig so that it always rests well on the board. I did shelf number 4 like this. And if we remember how I marked them in the previous video. Now the shelf number 3 has the letters to do it like this. The edges with edge banding are on the same side, and the numbers and letters match and are read from the same side. With the help of the wood strip and clamps, I make sure to align the shelf on top of the side. And just like before, aligning the marks on the jig carefully with the line, I drill the holes to make the dowel joints. And I do the same with shelf number 2. And now for shelf number 1, which goes right on the edge. Remember, I didn't draw a line, as it wasn't necessary. What I do is remount this piece on the bottom of the doweling jig. This piece will now serve as a stop. I insert the corresponding dowel, which sticks out in the center of the edge of the board, into the hole. I push the bottom piece until it's perfectly against the surface of the board. And with the knob on the top, I lock it in that position. So now I can drill the holes on the edge of the side of the bookcase for shelf number 1. With the shelf secured with clamps, just as I did for the previous shelves. Now, instead of aligning the marks with the line, I push the drilling jig until the stop hits against the edge of the board. And this way, I can drill the holes precisely exactly where I need them. Taking advantage of the adjusted stop, I drill the holes for shelf number 1 on the other side of the bookcase. And using the lines and the references of the numbers and letters, I drill the holes for the other shelves on the other side of the bookcase. This way, if we now assemble the bookcase, to avoid chipping the holes I am not going to dry fit it, we would have a simple bookcase with its sides and shelves, to which we can add a sheet at the back that would serve as a reinforcement. But instead of that, in the next video we will see some pro tips to install a recessed kickboard, and also a vertical reinforcement between the shelves. I leave links in the description to the first video where I cut and prepare the melamine chipboard, and the link to the next video with pro tips for drilling in complicated areas using the Doweling Jig. And I also leave a link to my website where you can see the Doweling Jig and also more information about making this bookcase.